this is Christina Ivy, a member of Lance, presenting this edition of our weekly update. Remember to check out our website at jalance.org and follow us on Twitter at Lance_JA. Our first topic this week is once again Central Westmoreland MP George Wright. In April of this year, he was captured on social media beating a woman with a stool, and then this video went around on social media. According to news reports, the police dropped the case because both he and the victim weren't cooperating with the investigations. This isn't unusual for domestic violence cases because there are several reasons why a victim might not feel like it's safe for them to come forward, especially if they're still involved with their abuser. Anyway, in the wake of the video circulation, many people condemned George Wright and called for his resignation. Some people called for him to be sacked as an MP, but there aren't any provisions for that in our parliamentary system. In fact, this is another incident that highlights how difficult our constitution makes it to recall MPs and senators. In our 2020 general election document, we called for the right to recall our MPs. Similarly, during the Norman Horn scandal, we called for a process to revoke the appointment of a senator so that we can remove them from office without having to make them resign. George Wright's actions highlight that citizens who lose faith in their representatives should have the right to recall them outside of general elections. The last time we commented on this issue, George Wright was at the start of a 2-month leave of absence from Parliament, meaning he could no longer sit on the government benches in the House of Representatives. During this absence, the people of Central Westmoreland have had no representation in Parliament. His leave of absence is coming to an end, and he's now resigned from the JLP to sit as an independent MP. But the core issue remains that there is no way to remove him from office without his resignation. The PMP, who are in opposition, have called for his resignation, but they're doing this while distancing the George Wright situation from the accusations against their General Secretary, Dayton Campbell. Dayton Campbell is being accused of statutory rape, and Karen Cross, the woman who brought this to light, is being criticized for going to social media instead of the police. But, as I've said before, not all victims want to interact with the police. Many victims just want their abuse to be known. As I've said before, there are several reasons why a victim might not feel like it's safe for them to come forward. We know the attitude most Jamaican police officers have towards women, and we can't be expected to rely on them to deliver justice. A defamation suit has been filed against her, Karen Cross. To counter, she has submitted statements signed by a justice of the peace. The statements are heavily redacted, which I would assume is to protect the identity of the victims, but nonetheless, it sends the wrong signal that the PMP is so quick to dismiss these allegations when it comes to one of their own, instead of instead of suspending their member while the investigation occurs. Our other topic today is customs reform. The government campaigned in the 2020 elections on the promise of customs reform. It had already been in progress before they called these elections. And recently, government MP Floyd Green gave an update on the progress of these reforms because he was one of the main people tweeting about it during the election cycle. So people were now tweeting back at him, asking where customs reform was going. And he gave an update on the progress. In this update, he highlighted that only 14 submissions were made to Parliament about the proposed act. And he kind of said this to counter against all of the people who were in his mentions complaining about customs reform and the need for customs reform. So it was as if to say that, oh, all of you people will complain on Twitter, but none of you will actually do the work of submitting. But this ignores the fact that the public was only given about a month to review an 852-page legislative document. If the government truly cared about consulting the public in this process, they would have found more ways to facilitate discussion and input. Lance submitted a document after consulting with our members because our central leadership has to get consensus from the various units before it can take a position on something. The process wasn't easy given the limited time that we had, but we settled on five key points. Firstly, we want the duty-free allowance for shipped goods to be raised. This is because one of the most common complaints in our meetings and in larger society is how weirdly low the threshold for dutiable items is. Like, we understand that duties are supposed to generate revenue and prevent money from leaving our economy and the island. But Jamaica is not a manufacturer of like most of the things that people are buying abroad. And a lot of the things are essential items that the public would have to buy anyway. As it stands, one would assume that the government is actually losing revenue from keeping the duty-free allowance so low because people are just circumventing the system entirely. Whereas if we had a slightly higher duty-free allowance, more people would be encouraged to not circumvent the system, and the government would be making gains off of that. There are prohibitively high duties for some very minor price differences. Even something costing 51 US dollars, once duty is factored in, it will cost double the amount almost than something that costs $49. And so people just rack up multiple $49 orders because they're trying to avoid the high duties associated with having an order over 50 US dollars. So customs is losing out on all of that revenue because the duty threshold is so low. The second thing that we'd like to see is a flat or default ad valorem duty because we think that the reason that the public has been so disgruntled with customs is how arbitrary the duties on items seem to be. The threshold, everybody knows, is 50 US dollars, but beyond that, it feels like the mechanism for the actual cost of bringing it in is just left to the whim of whoever's processing it at the time. We think that to promote transparency and simplicity, which is the goal of this bill, as stated, we are suggesting a flat percentage based duty. If that can't work, then we're recommending a flat default rate applicable to as many goods as possible without conflicting with other suggestions or other legislation. Another recommendation of ours is to maintain discounted rates for key firms and industries. This is because some jobs require equipment that is impossible to source locally or hard to get in small units without buying bulk. Also, to keep up with the competition, they might need to replace their equipment on a fairly regular basis. For large businesses with large budgets, this isn't a problem, but for small and medium enterprises, startups, independent contractors, and workers in the creative industry, this is much more of a problem. It can like seriously hamper their development. The government has said that they're trying to stimulate growth in the business sector, and we think this is one of the ways that they could be doing it. Our fourth recommendation was for duties based on energy efficiency because So much of our lives revolves around electricity consumption, but at the same time, we need to be doing everything we can to battle climate change. We think climate change can be fought through taxation, tariffs, among other things, because these would have effects on the ways we consume. The government could incentivize us to buy more energy efficient equipment and appliances. Seeing as one of the goals of this new customs bill is to make it more modern, we think part of this modernization duty should be the application of an energy consumption duty to all electronic devices brought into customs. The duty would be applied based on the power rating of the specific product in the case of appliances and electronics. Duties could also be applied to vehicles based on their capacity and fuel efficiency. The advantages would go to vehicles that have higher fuel efficiency, vehicles that carry more passengers, and vehicles that carry more laden weight. So those vehicles being imported would have lower rates. Our final recommendation was just for the government to discuss the Common External Tariff, which is a CARICOM tariff, within CARICOM's Council for Trade and Economic Development. Jamaica is a CARICOM member, so the government cannot unilaterally alter duties on goods listed in the Common External Tariff. There's a desire for reform within CARICOM, so Lance is suggesting that the government take advantage of the desire to call for alterations to the Common External Tariff.
Signing off now, this has been Christina Ivey, member of Lands, with your weekly update.